why I chose the topic, the climate federalism and decentralized climate governance as part of engaging as the legal expert member of the Kerala government's Coastal Zone Management Authority. I am relatively very familiar with the topic, and I am very familiar with the intricacies related to the climate change and adaptability, especially in the decentralized governance of climate change. So it is an honor to speak on the increasingly vital subject, the climate federalism and the decentralized climate governance. As a climate change reshapes ecosystems and economies, the governance structure that respond to it must also evolve. So the federalism in this context actually is both a promise, at the same time it may be a puzzle also. Why it is? The climate change is not just a national issue, it's not a global, it's a global issue. Actually, it looks like a local one every time. So it affects very by region. So the solution must be also being localized. That is the basic idea of this topic. So first we have to understand the jurisprudential background of climate governance to enter into the basic understanding of this topic. What is the real jurisprudence behind? So when we gone through the global jurisprudential evolution of the climate governance, the global climate governance framework has evolved primarily through certain international environmental laws, supported by some treaties, treaty laws, customary principles are there, and also the judicial interpretations from international, and at the same time the regional courts are there. So from the international initiatives, like at its core is the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. That is the motto behind the idea. So it enshrined by the UN itself, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and reiterated in the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement also. So from this international perspective, the principle recognizes and categorized as the first one, all nations share responsibility for addressing the climate change, but developed countries must take the lead due to their historical emissions and greater capacities. The next point, in developing countries like India, because I am coming from India, so it requires flexibility to prioritize the development goals. So they should have some priority. And from the Paris Agreement 2015 marked a jurisprudential shift by emphasizing the nationally determined contribution, that is a bottom-up model of governance. Here we can see climate action is nationally owned but locally tailored and globally reported one. So in this way, the world institutionalizing the decentralization in international climate law is very simple. So in this framework, decentralization is not merely a political work, and it's a jurisprudentially embedded in the global regime. Action must be context specific, inclusive of multiple levels of governance, and responsive to the local vulnerabilities also. So now we can focus with the international judicial trend towards the climate federalism. How the judiciary has adopted these kind of jurisprudential background. So here we are analyzing global judicial trends in climate federalism and localized governance. We can see that global courts are increasingly recognizing the justifiability of climate obligation, at the same time strengthening the legal grounding of decentralized action too. So to prove the same, I can put forward some examples also. The first one I will mention here, that is the Argentina Foundation versus the state of Netherlands in 2015-2019, that dispute has happened. The Dutch Supreme Court, what exactly done, held that the state liable for failing to meet emission targets. So, citing the both international human rights and domestic constitutional obligations also by the court. And though a national case, it had ripple effects across municipalities also. So that was one example from the judiciary, how they treated the decentralized climate governance. The second case I can raise for you, Juliana versus United States 2015 case. So what exactly happened? The youth petitioners argued that a federal inaction on climate change violated their constitutional right to life, liberty and property, they argued. And here, while the case faced setbacks, its spurred legal innovation around intergenerational equity, the principle raised by the court. And then later the case Legari versus Federation of Pakistan. There are another case in 2015. The Lahore High Court also put forwarded ordered the creation of Climate Change Commission. You have to create a commission for that. So reinforcing the idea that subnational governments and institutions bear legal responsibility for implementing climate policies. So these are several examples of the judicial trends. So that means beyond the international climate laws, these cases and the judiciary underscores that climate governance is multi-scalar, requiring legal recognition and action across national, subnational and the local levels. So now the question is, what is decentralized climate governance and what is its conceptual foundation? Also we have to understand what is the basic concept there. So basically the decentralized climate governance rests on three interlinked concepts in global jurisprudence. So the first one is subsidiarity principle. So decision making should occur at the most immediate level of governance competent to address a matter. And the recognizing in European Union the law of global environmental governance, this principle justifies local authority in climate adaptation and mitigation also. And the second theory or the principle, environmental justice and equity. How can we prove it? The global jurisprudence increasingly centers equity, including intragenerational justice, that means among the communities today, and intergenerational justice also they are put forwarding, that is future generation also their consideration. So the climate justice is rooted in localized realities, marginalized communities are disproportionately impacted. And the third is resilience and adaptation capacity, that is the principle. So the jurisprudence increasingly emphasizes adaptive governance in more of the time. That means the flexibility, inclusive system that can evolve with the climate risk also. And this necessitates the local participation innovation. So and institutional autonomy also it demands. So together, the three principles guide a normative framework that balance climate federalism. That means the system where central and subnational entities collaborate, not hierarchically, but it's horizontally they are necessary. So how now my topic is shifted to India in global context and how India adapting this jurisprudence to federal reality. So here, what exactly in India's context, the India's adaptation of this global jurisprudence even is uneven, but an evolving stage actually. While we do not have a climate law per se, Indian courts have interpreted Article 21, that means the right to life, to include environmental protection and invoked international environmental principles in domestic judgments. Basically, we can mention it as pecuniary, precautionary principles we have adapted, sustainable development we have adapted, a public trust doctrine also already enshrined by the Indian courts. So however, in the federal practice, India reflects actually a quasi-federal climate regime, and where the centers set the agenda but states implement the same. And the SPCC's renewable energy policies and urban mobility mission show early localization of global commitments also. The third one, the Finance Commission, how it acts, have begun integrating the forest and disaster metrics into resource distribution, and also they are echoing global trends of ecological fiscal reform. So yet the institutional deficit remains, India lacks formal legal structure actually for sharing the climate legislation, intergovernmental consensus building and the participatory climate governance also we are lacking. So next big challenge we are facing to define whether federalism and climate, whether the federalist governance is a facilitator or a hindrance. That is the question. So federalism by design actually decentralizes the power. This can facilitate climate governance by enabling local innovations, allowing subnational entities, and also encouraging policy experimentation also. But federalism can also hinder the climate action, like jurisdictional fragmentation causes some kind of policy deadlocks may cause. And the blame shifting also may happen. That also, and the patchwork legislations can result in uneven or ineffective climate outcomes may happen. So now we can prove by examples how federalism acts as a facilitator. We can move with some example also. For example, in the United States, actually when federal leadership under Trump rolled back the environmental protection, states like California and New York continued strong climate policies. California set a target to 100% clean electricity by 2045. So that is the first example. The second example, in Canada also, British Columbia implemented a carbon tax in 2008 itself. So much earlier than the federal mandate. So we have an example. And how does it act as hindrance also, there is an example. Take an example in Spain. We can see that the climate action was delayed due to dispute between the regional and central governments over resource control. There was a struggle in between the state and center regarding the resource. So that means the veto points and intergovernmental conflict can block meaningful policy progress also. We have two sides for the same issue. So from this example, only we can say that the overall effectiveness of federal climate governance therefore depends on political will actually. And institutional clarity should be there. And intergovernmental cooperation should be there. That should be ensured by the system also. So in a comparative perspective, globally we see varied expressions of climate federalism. In the US, already we have mentioned the issue, and Germany also, each of 16 landowners has a climate action plan aligned with the federal law, and coordination is supported by federal funding and the legal mandates. And Netherlands also, we have the agenda case already we have mentioned. The court ordered the government to reduce emission, recognizing inadequate action of the violation of human rights under the European Convention. So the Netherlands and Germany illustrate how courts are shaping climate accountability, pushing governments to act in line with the constitutional rights also. In Canada also we have another example, created pan-Canadian framework on clean growth and climate change is there. So these cases highlighted how multi-level governance can be both dynamic at the same time the conditions. So again, in practical experience, we have to analyze India's complex federal ecology. We have some struggles, some more struggles we have identified. Here, India's experience with the climate federalism is marked by constitutional ambiguity first and institutional fragmentation also we are facing. The word climate does not appear in the Indian constitution even, but yet climate related subjects are scattered across all the three lists. We have the union list, central list, the concurrent list, and the seventh schedule, the forest, the term is there, the water, the term is there, agriculture and pollution, these terms are available in the seventh schedule, but there is no such term climate as such in the Indian constitution. You will see that. And state action plan on climate change we have, that means SAPCCs, and that means we have a decentralized climate planning according to the state action plan. But the issue is that the state action plan on climate change were intended to reflect local priorities actually, but many were cut and copy paste of the national plan is happening in India. So they lacked the budgetary autonomy also. The fiscal autonomy is also the another matter we are facing. So another example, the Kerala flood. I am coming from Kerala, I am a Keralite. So we have faced a lot of climate change issues the recent years, especially in 2018 with the massive flood, and later in the earthquakes, landslides are happening there. The Kerala flood in 2018 exposed the gap between the state level disaster preparedness and local coordination we have faced. So despite early warnings, municipal system were overwhelmed. So that we have faced. And also despite the 73rd and 74th Amendment which constitutionalized the local governments in India, the panchayats, municipalities and remained under-resourced and under-recognized in climate planning. Actually, we have no legal sanctioning for the local bodies to take care of the issues of the climate change issues. So we are lacking the legal. So this disjuncture calls for a reimagination of climate federalism in India, not a legal rearrangement alone, but I think as a normative shift towards the inclusive, participatory and accountable governance we need. Then the question is how to move toward cooperative climate federalism. So that is the question I am raising. So I think a forward-looking model of climate federalism actually should embrace, firstly, a climate governance code should be there. So that delineates the roles, reduces the overlap issues and encourages the vertical and the horizontal cooperation also it may ensure. And the second is empowered local governments. I already mentioned that we have no clear-cut legitimate laws to support the local bodies to handle these kind of climate change issues in India. So we have to empower through the training, at the same time the fiscal support, this fiscal autonomy to the local bodies are very important to deal with such an issues of climate change. And there is a shared constitutional responsibility that recognizing climate action as a joint duty with a clear monitoring mechanism should be there, and also the cross-border collaboration also we have to support. So especially in ecological regions like river basins and coastal zones that cut across state boundaries, I think. So India can learn from others but must chart its own path, I think, and contextualize the pluralistic and responsive to both ecological diversity and democratic aspiration. That is the main point. So here I conclude, I think, my presentation, like, let us not view federalism as an obstacle but an opportunity. Why? To localize the responsibility and democratize the climate decisions and build resilient institutions also. Whether in India or wherever it's elsewhere, climate federalism must follow some basic rules. That is the first one, the participatory rather than a bureaucratic one. And second one, the flexible rather than formulaic one. And the third one, responsive rather than the reactive one. So in doing so, we move closer to governance paradigm that is climate just, constitutionally grounded and globally aligned a nation. Thank you for your patience hearing. I am sharing my little bit of my thoughts regarding the climate change governance. I think this platform is open for further discussions and more research we demands in this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Amruta Satheesan has attended several conferences. Earlier time she was attending as a research scholar. Now she is a doctorate holder. Dr. Amruta Satheesan, she acquired her doctorate from Central University of Kerala, Tiruvalla campus. And congratulations as well. And she is accompanying with the Member of Parliament from India, A. Rahim sir. Actually he was told me to not announce, but I cannot control my emotions. That is why, sir, please stand up and just way of the Member of Parliament from India. So unofficially he is accompanying, so that is why we are not taking his photographs and all. Thank you very much.